YouTube, what is going on? Theo Bean here, and today we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, kind of what we can expect, some differences, things like that, taking into everything in account what we know from Part 1 and 2, and how that's going to kind of change how things are going into Part 3. So if you don't know, I did make a video very similar to this for Part 2. That was even before we knew that Part 2 was going to be called Rebirth. So with it, we're going to be doing something pretty similar, right? So first off, starting off the bat here, what we know, right, that's going to be a little bit different going into Part 3 is, first of all, the Tiny Bronco is assumedly flying to the Northern Crater, or the Icicle Lodge, which was totally different from Part 2, right? Considering the Tiny Bronco was destroyed, we essentially go there by foot after going through the Forgotten Capital. Also is the fact that Wutai and Rocket Town are going to be in Part 3. Like in the original, Wutai and Rocket Town were a part of what would have been included in the timeline of Part 2. Things are different, those have been excluded, and those have been confirmed that they will be added as part of the game in Part 3. So going forward, dissecting this entire thing, we're going to be kind of going through the timeline part by part, as well as adding in some things that's going to be different, that things that, you know, we can expect to be going over with the context, everything that we know from Part 1 and 2. So my theory is that Part 3 is going to be starting in the Northern Crater, that open area which you technically can run through. Similar to how Rebirth started with the grasslands, I figured that this is going to be our first explorable region. This will be, of course, a new region to us as we're exploring it, giving us the same open world feel. Since it was successful, it worked in Part 2. I'd imagine, minus some slight variations, we're pretty much going to be getting the same type of feel for that. I'd imagine, of course, before we go into that, we're going to be getting some sort of recount of everything that's happened, right? Going off the unreliable narrator with Cloud, you know, we're kind of robbed of Aerith's death. That was, of course, one of the biggest scenes in all gaming history when it originally happened in Final Fantasy VII Original. So, of course, going post that event, everybody is going to be sad, feeling terrible, minus Cloud, because Cloud is so messed up in the head. He's not even sure what's going on, and it appears that he still thinks that she's alive somehow, and he is completely not even in touch with the fact that she's actually gone. So I'd imagine after some talk with everybody together before they start to make their journey towards the Northern Crater, there's going to be some sort of discussion or something like that to the opening of Part 3. So again, right, with this, I think they're really going to drive home the state that Cloud's degradation is in and just how bad he is, because he, again, right, doesn't know what's going on. Aerith's dead, and they're going to kind of re-emphasize that, considering we're getting a gap between Part 2 and Part 3. They want to emphasize just how bad it is, kind of how like we got to see at the very end of Rebirth. So first area that we're probably going to be actually stepping into is going to be the Icicle Inn, or Icicle Lodge, right, whatever it's called. I'd imagine we're going to be getting some sort of context as well for Professor Gas, who he really is. He was actually referenced in, I can't remember if it was Remake or Rebirth. I believe Tifa makes a comment to Aerith about it, that she talked to him and how he was so helpful to her. I think it's going to be revealed to us who he actually is, his relationship with Ifalna, just like how we found out in the original and how important that is. With that, I don't know if we're going to be getting snowboarding. I don't think it's going to be part of the game of how we get down, but I imagine it's probably going to be some sort of mini game or implemented in some sort of way as we're going through Part 3. Kind of how, you know, a lot of things have been made into mini games. I'd imagine snowboarding will just be that sort of adaptation. So since it is kind of a meme, considering the original, Aerith dies and like 10 minutes later you're snowboarding down a mountain. Following that, we have the cave. We go through, we fight the Schizo Dragon, the two-headed dragon. From there we go into the events of the North Crater. I think these things are pretty much going to play out as we can expect, minus, you know, the cave maybe gets taken out. Northern Crater, of course, we're getting, which is ultimately going to lead to what should be, assumedly, another Genova fight. And then Cloud, assumingly, either giving the materia to somebody else because they'll be like, hey man, you're not right, let me hold on to it for you. They get deceived. Cloud ultimately still gives the black materia to Sephiroth, and then with that the weapons emerge. I'd imagine as well Shinra will be there as well, thinking, oh well, this is the promised land, maybe this is it, you know. And then boof, before we know it, as soon as Sephiroth gets the black materia, he will summon Meteor, and with that the weapons are going to break out of the ice. After that event, I imagine we're going to get some sort of thing, right? So similar to what happens is Tifa is knocked unconscious as they aboard the High Wind. How that's going to happen, I don't know. I'm assuming maybe this is how we get the High Wind, same thing as before. Again, talking about things from devs that have already been confirmed. The devs have confirmed the High Wind will be in the game. I'd imagine it's going to be... At this point, we get it just like we do in the original. They've been trying to work on ways to make sure it works properly with how world traversal is in part 2, considering the fact that you could fly, or essentially, sorry, not fly, but you could ride the Penny Bronco from one area into another without any sort of loading screens. So they've been working on to make that and how that'll all be implemented with the High Wind. But with that, Tifa's knocked unconscious on top of the High Wind from one of the weapons just blasting off at damn near light speed. And during this time, she recalls her meeting Cloud again for the first time in Midgar, and how he's just kind of unconscious shortly before he joins Avalanche. I'd imagine there's probably going to be some sort of emphasis on this, as well as how he's gone from that point to how he is now. He's practically a completely different person. His degradation is again driving this more. I think this is going to be a huge part of it, considering Cloud has the biggest character change of anybody here in part 3, minus the touch up on the details of who Vincent and Sid are. But this is going to be talking about how Cloud is degradation before he actually becomes the Cloud that we come to know and love. Minus that, Tifa wakes up in surprise for being held captive in Junon. We're going to have the events of the first time, I'm assuming we will actually see Meteor in the sky, how we break out of that. Potentially Sapphire weapon. My hopes is that Sapphire weapon is an actual fight, assumedly how Ruby and Emerald weapon are, and technically Diamond 2 and Ultima. But I'm hoping instead of getting his face blasted off by the giant Mako cannon, hopefully we get to fight him, because, you know, who wouldn't love to fight another weapon? Fingers crossed. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But eventually we escape from Junon, given those events, and we head over to Mideel. That's where I think we would possibly get another explorable area, with Mideel being a very small island in the game. That can always be kind of changed in how they implement that, especially considering I'd imagine to add several explorable areas. Their timetable of the game is expected to be completed is around 3 years, considering that's what it took them in order to finish Rebirth, confirmed in interviews as well from that. So with that, we get Cloud, degradation, things like that, and then with it we get a major party switch up, which is why I think this is going to be huge in regards to storytelling and how things could be changed, considering the fact that, well, Cloud and Tifa won't be with this in the story. We're no longer going to have Aerith ending some sort of insane Omni-Aerith type of event, as well as maybe Zack could be implemented. Again, who the hell knows going into part 3, but in the original, Sid kind of takes over as the party leader. This is going to be interesting to see if this happens, given at this point, unless we go to Rocket Town by this point, we still don't really know who Sid is. Same thing with Vincent. I'd imagine Vincent and his backstory is going to be explained through his side quests. Since Vincent was originally a missable character in the original Final Fantasy VII, I'd imagine his side quests, who he is, his connection to being a Turk and Shinra, will be part of the main story and how that's all explored. So with it, right, our party takes off, and the quest for the huge materia in order to use it to stop Meteor begins. And I think this is where the game really opens up and where we're going to get a ton of differences. First of all, being Wutai. Wutai being something that's going to be implemented here in part 3, I think this makes the most sense for the war between Wutai as well as Shinra. We're going to meet who Viceroy Saruf is, who he really is. I will not reveal that, which is, even though it's kind of technically confirmed who Viceroy Saruf is. We're going to get Yuffie side quests, all of that part of Wutai. Hopefully the end of Don Corneo as well as touching up on other things like that is the weapons. For the search for the huge materia, my guess is the biggest change in Final Fantasy VII Part 3 is going to be the huge materia is going to be implemented through the weapons, the smaller weapons that we saw in Rebirth. So instead of searching for these giant things, such as the coral reactor, the biggest difference is going to be, since it was destroyed, it is not destroyed in the original. We got to meet the weapons, and these weapons, as you saw, which Yuffie also alludes to, are kind of made up of giant materia. Just like we got also with the Gongaga reactor, we see Shinra trying to extract this giant materia, even though it's not really alluded on, from the giant weapon. Or sorry, from the smaller weapon, I should technically say. But in order to get this huge materia, I think this is going to be one of the bigger changes. And so we're going to be able to, I'm assuming, have to save the weapons from being killed by Shinra as they're trying to extract them to use it. Of course, I think at this point we're also going to be getting Rocket Town. Here we're going to meet Shira, probably some more look into how Sid knows Ifalna. Sid kind of says this to Aerith. He asks her, you know, are you Ifalna, his daughter, and how he knew her. I actually don't remember if they allude to how that this relationship was ever a thing ever in the original Final Fantasy VII, but bringing Sid into the picture and why he wanted to help Aerith, in some way she probably helped him, that's why he's tied to her, and why he wants to repay that most likely forward to Aerith and helping her at the end of Rebirth. So I'd mention we're going to get that side story, how that's tied into everything like that, as well as during this period we're also going to get information into Vincent, his side quests and backstory as well. I'd imagine this could be implemented when we go under Junon, as well as those events where we originally would meet with Carry Armor. And then during that is how we also get access to the area where we start Vincent's side quests, things like that as well. How will that be implemented? Who was Vincent? How was he a Turk? What happened to him? Why was he in Shinra Manor for all those years? And then, you know, kind of concluding that backstory and then giving his background. Once all those events kind of conclude, that's when we get the events of the live stream. That's where Cloud finally realizes where he is. Tifa helps him realize who Cloud actually is, what actually happened, Aerith's death. Cloud is finally going to be able to process it, and it's going to finally hit home that one of his best friends and the people he cherished, somebody he cared about truly, is actually and finally gone. With that, Cloud is going to become Cloud again, and then that's when, you know, we're going to get the full party back together. Cloud apologizes to everybody, and he promises to, you know, fix his shit as he helps the party do what they have to do in order to stop Sephiroth and stop Meteor in order to save the planet. At this point, right, going off the original, we return to Rocket Town with the rocket. Sid's dreams of going into space in order to stop that whole event. And then we return to the Forgotten Capital. We do this with Bugenhagen, talk about what's going on, Aerith, Holy, insight into that. And then with it, we get the events of returning to Midgar. So over the course of these events, I could definitely see some change, some variance in things that are going to happen throughout the game. How these orders play out, whether things are changed, more context is given. I think these are the biggest areas where there's also more context or things that can change compared to the original. Eventually, though, we will get to the point where we do return to Midgar. We're going to have the events with Diamond Weaponed, eventually the firing of the cannon, possibly the end of essentially Shinra, right, or Rufus and those whole events, that whole scene, and then finally with the laser firing off, destroying Diamond Weapon, and also destroying the barrier that is protecting Sephiroth in the Northern Crater. This is going to be our last chance for side quests before finish wrapping everything up. The equivalent of our chapter 12, chapter 13 that we essentially got in Rebirth, and then finally our descent into the Northern Crater, where we will go down all the way towards the live stream and face off against Sephiroth in order to stop Meteor and save the planet. So of course, needless to say, I think the events in the Northern Crater, our fight with Sephiroth, the ending, the timelines is going to be completely different. Things are going to be a lot different in part 3 compared to the original. Especially considering, right, things with Wu Tai. We could be getting some events similar to Advent Children, references to Advent Children during that part, as well as Sephiroth or Jenova making the appearances, things like that. We know we're going to be getting a war between Wu Tai and Shinra, so the events in Wu Tai could be completely different, how that all plays out as well, how the weapons play out, all these things, right? So, of course, when we finish part 1 with Remake, we had some questions. What was this timeline? Why we're seeing visions? Who are these harbingers of fate? What's going on? And as much as we did get some more information, the ending of Rebirth only left us with more questions. So going into part 3, there's still so much that we still don't know. So hence why we're making this video today, going over some of these things to start this open discussion to figure out what do we know, what can we expect to be different, right? And so going forward, here's the list, essentially everything that I put down of some questions that we still have. So first of all is Wu Tai and Rocket Town. As much as we know that these are confirmed for part 3, surely their events are going to be different. Again, touching on with Wu Tai with the war with Shinra, those events, instead of just chasing Yuffie who stole our materia, I do think that's still also very possible to happen, considering it's very clear that Yuffie has a extreme obsession with materia. I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up stealing it, if maybe Jenova tells her to do it, something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if in part 3, Jenova starts screwing with the other party members, kind of like we get before the Northern Crater. She deceives either, I believe, Barret or Red when you give them the black materia, which is why that whole plot fails, even though Cloud can't be trusted since he is totally messed up. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more of that over the course of part 3, these different events too. Jenova not only trying to mess with Cloud, since, well, technically Cloud's going to be absent for part of the game, but with the other party members as well. Rocket Town, will we be going there twice due to the launching of the rocket, Cid's backstory, meeting Shira, all that stuff? Will that be implemented with essentially the weapons, anything like that, the huge materia, how that might be changed? Who knows, right? Next, of course, is also Zack and Aerith. So Zack doesn't know what happened to Aerith. Is this also something that's totally different, right? Because going through this remake trilogy now, Zack's alive. Zack never had to mourn Aerith's death because Zack was already gone. Well, now the script is flipped, and in this pug timeline, I believe what it is, or sorry, it's a terrier timeline. Timeline being a general term, it's not technically timeline, they've kind of shut that down. But Zack being alive, and now Aerith is gone. So Zack's mourning of Aerith is also going to be something that we can expect at some point through part 3. Are the weapons the huge materia, right? I kind of already proposed this as well. I think this makes a lot of sense. We kind of saw this. I don't know if it's going to be a one-to-one translation, if that being necessarily the case, but obviously there's going to be some sort of simulation there with why the weapons are, you know, essentially being linked to the huge materia. I think this would also make sense when you consider the submarine, right? All that event, Shinra trying to use a submarine to go after the weapons, things like that. I think there's a lot of ways that that could be implemented, and with the right context, I think it does make sense. So that's another thing we'll have to wait and see. Another thing, party configurations. How the hell are they going to work? So, of course, right, in part 2, we have the most party members we've ever had. With part 3, the party configurations are going to be different. So again, right, talking about how no Cloud and no Tifa are going to be in our party. We're going to be relying on Vincent and Cid to kind of replace them. Of course, their characters and their combat is going to be revealed in part 3. That we don't know until the time will come. But how will party configurations work, considering we're going to be getting characters, losing some characters? Will Sid kind of be more of a Swiss Army knife, kind of like Cloud, to replace him? How the hell is Vincent's guns and his ranged attacks going to work? How the hell is his limit break going to work, considering his limit break was a boss in Rebirth? Not to mention he was massive. How is that going to be implemented? Again, more questions, only time will tell. Next part is going to be Knights of the Round, and will it be implemented as part of the Proto Relics quest? I think, as for myself as well as others, this seems like the most likely scenario. It makes the most sense, considering one, not only was Gilgamesh, essentially the main part of the Proto Relics quest during Rebirth, but his quest to be, the ultimate warrior, and considering Knights of the Round also leads to Alexander and his knights, the ultimate warriors, right? This kind of could be tied into one another. I do think Gilgamesh returns, and then he will be implemented in this quest somehow on our quest to ultimately get Knights of the Round, which is one of the most strongest materia in the entirety of the game. Next is going to be our super bosses, aka Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon. Will they actually be included as super bosses as well? How are they going to tackle these as super bosses? How can you include a weapon on the scale that are as giant as they are into a battle? I think this is one of the biggest changes that the team at Square is going to have to implement in part 3. I think, the harder fights and how they've implemented into part 2 and part 1 have been totally fine. But how do you do a boss of this scale? Especially considering how huge these weapons are. I hope they're not just shrunk down as they kind of some enemies feel in regards to the combat simulator. That way to kind of give scale and how insane, how hype it was, fighting these things in the original, especially due to the success of Final Fantasy 16, seeing these giant kaiju versus kaiju battles. Implementing some sort of scale to that is going to really bring the importance and the hype of fighting what were the strongest bosses in all Final Fantasy VII. One of the other big changes going into part 3 that I think this has been looked over by a lot of people is the fact that Song is still alive. So in regards to things changing, right, I want to say for the most part, through the end of part 1 and part 2, everybody that's died essentially died in the original, minus Sung. You can also correct me if I'm mistaken. Song does die during the Temple of the Ancients, but at the end of Rebirth, he is still alive somehow. Even though he is still stabbed, he does not actually die. So what will Song's purpose be in part 3? Will he also be part of the final fight during our journey back to Midgar, where we fight off versus all the Turks, which was essentially Reno, Rude, and Elena? Will he be included in this? How will this all play out? What is his purpose? And where does his life ultimately end? My theory is that he still dies. How much things have changed from the original to now? In the same sense, they are all still the same, right? Again, the same people who died are died. The same people who are alive are still alive. Rufus and Saruf, how will this all play out with Wu-Tai, things like that? Ultimate weapons and gear. This is kind of a more RPG and more nerdy thing, right? Something I was thinking about was, in order to do this, right, how would these play out? And I guess this is more so not really a question, but I guess more so something I really want. Of course, right, with an RPG, the ultimate goal is to get the best gear and the best items that you can get. So I hope that there is some sort of scale when it comes to part 3 that's a little bit different from how the weapon system works from part 1 and 2, since they were pretty much extremely similar. Not much had changed in that regard. But I'm hoping that these ultimate weapons and the best gear for each character does actually feel like an ultimate weapon, not more or less of, I'm gonna go with this weapon, which is better for this build, versus this weapon, this is better for physical damage, this is better for magic damage. I'm hoping each character actually has an ultimate weapon, and it feels just as rewarding as when you got these for your team for finishing those side quests or whatever content it was, like we did in the original. The black materia, and how the hell did it get into Cloud's pocket? This we still don't know how it ended up. It was funny to see that Kate's fortune did in fact come true, Keep an eye on your belongings, lucky color black. And of course, at the very end, somehow Cloud still has a black materia. With that, we also had the question, what the hell is the clear materia? What was holy in this timeline? We're not really sure why it's hollowed out. All we know is that the Harbingers pretty much sucked the life out of it. And now it is this clear materia. What purpose will it serve? Obviously, it will serve something. I believe this has also been alluded to as well by the devs. It's only a time will tell type of matter to figure out what essentially it will become and how it's going to help Cloud and its party to defeat Sephiroth and save the planet. Omni Slash, of course, right? I do think how the new limit breaks were implemented in part 2 was actually really well done. But in order to get the best limits for characters, you kind of had the farm limit. I'm curious to see, especially for Cloud, his difference was that you actually had to get it from the gold saucer. So how will Omni Slash and the essentially tier 3 limits, as I guess, or tier 4 technically actually, limits, how will they be achieved for Cloud and the party going into Rebirth, and making sure that they do in fact feel special and stronger, kind of in line with the ultimate weapons and gear for our party. Another thing that we still don't have answers for is Nero in Deep Ground. I think it's been confirmed that Weiss was just a hologram, but Nero is definitely a living, breathing person. Is he gonna pop up and when we return to Midgar during that area before the closer to the end? Is he going to be added back into Vincent's story and his side quests, things like that, and when we get to find out who he is with Deep Ground? Another thing we still don't know about, but has definitely been left open. I'm just hoping we get an answer to that as well. And then finally, last but not least, the quote, we still don't know what it means, and we got to hear it again. 7 seconds till the end. Enough time perhaps, but what will you do with it? I believe that's what he says. What the hell does this mean? We still don't know. So it's safe to say that after finishing part 2, as we know a lot more, and at the same time there's just so many more questions. It's actually insane how much stuff they're gonna get. So how they're gonna finish this in part 3, along with different areas and things like that being implemented, there's still so many questions, things that we don't know, right? Wu Tai, exploring that as an area as well. Rocket Town, are they... Oh, gosh, it's just so many things that we don't know. I think that with this, right, again, when I did the part 2 video, we were pretty close to a lot of stuff. I think I'm at least in the general direction of some of these things. Exactly am I on it? I don't know. It's going to be hard to say. We won't know until the time is right. But with that said, this is an open discussion. I'm curious to see what you guys think and to get your brains thinking about these things as well. Especially some of these things that haven't been talked about a lot, right? I'm curious to see what you guys think about Sung. Why is he still alive? Nero, is he going to be part of Wu Tai? Is he going to be part of Vincent? Who knows, right? All these things are very open-ended. I'm curious to see your guys' theories and kind of hear what the community has to say as well. With the ending of Rebirth, it's only sparked so many questions, so much discussion, especially with the ending. I think we pretty much have that down. We know what to expect. We know what we're supposed to know, and we know what we're not. But this kind of giving more questions and context to the rest of the story and what we can expect in part 3. With it, guys, thank you so much. That's pretty much it. I'm hoping that you guys liked the video. If you can, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to have some more Rebirth content coming out as well. This is one of the videos I wanted to make since, you know, I did enjoy doing the part 2, and I thought that I was pretty close on most of the stuff. Minus, of course, Rocket Town, things like that. I did call the Forgotten Capital being the ending. That was my theory, just based off spacing out the story and everything like that. But that is going to be it, guys. Thank you so much again for watching. If you can, leave a comment down below. I'm here to hear what you guys think, and I'll be joining you guys in the discussion with that. Again, if you like the content, please like, subscribe as well, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, peace and deuces. See ya.